Seeds of Wisdom RV and Economic Updates Thursday afternoon, the 10th of July 25. Listen to the full version on the official dinarreport.com blog and become our supporter on Patreon. Good afternoon. Dinar recaps. Trump administration imposes 50% tariff on Brazilian imports. In a dramatic escalation of trade tensions, the Trump administration has announced a sweeping 50% tariff on all Brazilian imports, citing political censorship, judicial overreach, and unfair trade practices as justification. The move, shared via President Trump's Truth Social account, has been swiftly condemned by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who promised reciprocal action under Brazil's economic reciprocity law. Tariffs justified by Bolsonaro's treatment and social media censorship. President Trump claimed the new tariffs were necessary due to Brazil's unjust treatment of former President Jair Bolsonaro in the courts and the nation's legal actions against US-based social media platforms. The US must move away from a long-standing and very unfair relationship created by Brazil's tariff policies, President Donald Trump. According to Trump, the trade imbalance and court-ordered censorship in Brazil have become a major threat to the US economy and national security. He emphasized that any retaliatory tariffs issued by Brazil would trigger additional levies beyond the initial 50%. Brazil responds, "We will not accept tutelage." President Lula issued a strong response on X, formerly Twitter, asserting Brazil's sovereignty and defending its judicial system. Any unilateral tariff increases will be addressed in accordance with Brazil's economic reciprocity law. Sovereignty, respect, and the unwavering defense of the interests of the Brazilian people are the values that guide our relationship with the world. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula rejected the tariffs outright, asserting that Brazil will not accept any tutelage, and reaffirmed the legitimacy of Brazil's legal system in addressing both domestic and international concerns. Tariffs may affect 22 countries, BRICS in the crosshairs. The 50% import levy is not exclusive to Brazil. Trump reportedly sent similar letters to 22 countries, imposing unilateral tariffs up to 50%, all set to take effect August 1. Among them, Brazil appears to face some of the steepest penalties. While Trump also threatened BRICS and allied nations with an additional 10% tariff for promoting what he calls an anti-American agenda, it remains unclear if this will directly affect Brazil, which has advocated for de-dollarization and multipolar trade. Notably, there was no mention of the BRICS penalty in Trump's letter to Lula. Geopolitical and economic implications. This move signals a return to aggressive tariff diplomacy under Trump's second-term foreign policy, prioritizing U.S. national interests and economic leverage over multilateral engagement. If fully implemented, these tariffs could strain U.S.-Brazil relations, undermine BRICS, push for non-dollar trade settlements, trigger retaliatory measures that may affect agricultural, industrial, and energy exports. Conclusion: trade war or political posturing? The Trump administration's tariff blitz is set to redefine the U.S.-Brazil economic relationship. Whether this leads to a full-scale trade war or forced negotiations will depend on how Brazil and other targeted nations respond in the coming weeks. With Trump signaling zero tolerance for anti-American narratives, and Brazil doubling down on economic sovereignty, global markets will be watching closely ahead of the August 1 enforcement deadline. BRICS omits de-dollarization and new currency at 2025 summit. Despite growing expectations, BRICS leaders made no mention of de-dollarization or the formation of a new common currency during the 17th annual summit, held in Rio de Janeiro this past Sunday and Monday. The two-day event, which has in the past strongly emphasized building an alternative to US dollar dominance, concluded without major economic policy announcements. Significantly, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin did not attend the summit, with proceedings instead led by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. De-dollarization and common currency left off the agenda. The absence of any discussion on launching a new BRICS currency or reducing dependence on the US dollar marks a sharp departure from the bloc's earlier rhetoric. These topics were central to past summits and widely promoted as pillars of the BRICS agenda aimed at restructuring global financial power. However, the 2025 summit offered no policy progress or roadmaps for either initiative. The development indicates that the bloc is not serious about the issues and is only beating around the bush, watcher, guru analysis. Instead of bold declarations, BRICS members limited financial discussions to voluntary bilateral trade using local currencies, a step seen as symbolic rather than systemic. Discontent with IMF and World Bank still front and center. Although de-dollarization was not formally addressed, the alliance continued to criticize Western-led financial institutions. Leaders expressed frustration with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank, accusing both of bias toward the US and other Western powers while neglecting the needs of the Global South. They argued that the current global financial order remains skewed, offering insufficient access to credit and capital for developing economies, particularly those in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. Summit lacks momentum without Russia and China. The absence of key players like Russia and China may have contributed to the lack of strategic direction at the summit. Their presence has historically driven the more ambitious aspects of the BRICS agenda, particularly in currency and trade realignment. Without them, the summit felt cautious and subdued, leading many to question whether BRICS still holds the resolve to challenge the US-led financial system. What's next for BRICS? While de-dollarization and the proposed BRICS currency were sidelined at this year's summit, officials stopped short of abandoning these ambitions entirely. Leaders emphasized that trade in local currencies will remain an option and may become more formalized in the future. Still, the lack of clarity or commitment suggests that BRICS is struggling to present a unified financial vision amid growing global attention on multipolarity. Whether this pause is temporary or reflective of deeper divisions within the bloc remains to be seen. Listen to the full version on the official dinarreport.com blog and become our supporter on Patreon. Source: dinarrecaps.com